that brings us to the absolute powerhouse of the project tracker. This element, it's one of my favorite. Project tracker and weekly review are both very, very, very good. And I'm going to hopefully walk you through why I love this element so much. Let's first have a brief look at the element connections. Later on, there will be quite a bit of theory on this particular element. Of course, you're free to skip just to the notion building part. But I would, once again, I'm going to say it a million times. I would recommend sticking around for a little bit longer. The connections that we have. First of all, like mentioned, we have all of the actions that are related to a specific project. So we have a connection with the action tracker. We have all of the habits related to a project. Then we have vision goals, which are the long-term and abstract goals. And actually, the project tracker is related to those vision goals. Then we have our weekly review, during which we check in with all of our projects. And we have the reflection questions, which we, of course, use to scope the project and also reflect on it once it's done. And then lastly, during the monthly review, we check in with the SMART goals related to every particular project. And potentially, we can also interact with some of the other reflections. And at the end of the year, during our yearly review, we sort of look back at all the projects that we have completed. This is just a very short list, but it just gives us a little fresh reminder of everything that we've done that year. And yeah. So the project tracker over here, you can see, is on this level. Let me just switch that one to line. On this level of the action review hierarchy, meaning that it's a little bit longer feedback loop and that we mainly check in with it during our weekly review. Okay, so let's have a look at what this project tracker actually is and what the goal of this project tracker is. In a nutshell, the goal of the project tracker is to combine knowledge and action to execute on parts of our vision goals. Now, we just did the knowledge and the action databases, so you already know that we have these two types of information. We want to bring those together in a sort of practical engine so that we can actually start executing on our goals. On our long-term, over here you can see, let me go previous page, on our long-term vision goals, right? We translate those through SMART goals into our projects so that we can then execute on them using knowledge and action. So let's dive a little deeper into that. The essence of nature is change. Everything in this world is always changing. Everything is impermanent, right? The only thing that is permanent is change. Everything is always moving. It's constantly in flux. So the question is not if things are changing, but where things are changing. And this is where goal setting comes in. Earlier, we had a look at this idea that the world is essentially one big Minecraft server, right? Everything is just little blocks that we're putting together to reach certain outcomes. And goal setting is basically determining which set of patterns we want to create in the world. And this could either be a very small and simple goal, but it could also be a very big and complex goal. So for example, maybe I just want to create these 4 squares, right? Maybe this is just my goal. I'm going to create these squares and I'm going to turn them into a block. That might be a very small and simple goal. A bigger goal might actually be, no, I want to create this sort of pyramid shape. This is already much more complex and requires many more blocks. And similarly, all the way at the end here, we have this very complex shape that would take a lot of knowledge and a lot of execution to realize. Now, for a long time, I was trying to determine for myself, what is the difference between a vision goal and a SMART goal and a milestone and an action? It's like, where does one thing turn into the other, right? If I'm working on an action for 2 hours, is that not more of a milestone? And if I have a goal for the coming 4 weeks versus the coming 6 months versus the coming year, when is it a SMART goal and when is it a vision goal? And all of these different sort of goal setting modalities were very confusing to me. Until I sort of made this visual over here, I all of a sudden realized this is all arbitrary because we can just choose wherever on this line we set a goal. And it doesn't really matter where we set the line. The thing is, we do need to set the line somewhere. So this right here might be an action. This right here might be a milestone, and that right there might be a vision goal. We could also put it somewhere else on the line, but we want to put the line somewhere. And as a general rule of thumb, we start in the present moment with actions, right? That is very small and simple. And we end all the way in the future with purpose. So we start small and simple, and we move to big and complex. And everything that happens in between is basically just arbitrary goal setting. Okay, so that is sort of the basics of goal setting. Within the project tracker, there are sort of three different things coming together. The first one is wisdom and insight. And wisdom and insight is basically knowing which pattern we need or desire. So this is knowing what is it actually that we want to do, right? So we have these little building blocks, as you can see over here, and it's sort of trying to figure out that structure that we want to create. Okay, once we know what we want to do, then the question is, how are we going to do that? How are we going to structure the objects into this desired pattern? So we have these 4 blocks over here. Now we're actually going to take those 4 blocks and we're going to put them together like this to create that desired shape that we had. Okay, so that's the knowledge. That is where we want to go. How are we going to get there? Then after we've determined how to get there, then we want to execute. We actually want to do the thing we planned, right? We made the structure over here, and now we're actually putting those blocks together to build the thing, right? So we start with knowing what we want, then knowing how to get there, and then actually doing it. And these two things, the knowledge of how to get there and the execution of it, together form our production capacity. So our production capacity is basically how much capacity, how much capability do we have to produce something? And that is a combination of knowing the right things to do and actually doing it. Because as you can see over here, we might have this very elaborate goal, right? We might have picked something on this continuum that's very far to the right, maybe like building $1 million business or traveling the entire world. But that is a very big and complex goal. And if we do not have enough production capacity, we will not be able to lift that goal into reality. So our job or our mission is to sort of increase the amount of production capacity that we have so that we can actually manifest the things that we want to manifest, things that we think are important to create in this world. So then the question becomes, how can we increase our production capacity? The first thing that we can do is we can increase the size of our own production capacity through learning and skill acquisition. And this is also sort of what we looked at in the previous chapter, right? It's about our personal knowledge, our personal skills, the ability that we as a person have. The other option that we have is to increase the quantity of our production capacity. And the way we do this is by either influencing people or influencing robots. And the way people are influenced are either through social dynamics, right? The social skills that we have, convincing other people, persuading other people, or by paying them. And this is pretty much how a large part of our economy runs, right? You get paid or I get paid to do something that the other person wants me to do. So we're influencing people through capital. Now, the way robots are influenced is by technical skills, right? So this is learning to program or learning engineering. This is very much we have a computer and I'm telling it what to do. These things together sort of form our collective production capacity. So over here you can see this is my circle. I've already increased it a little bit, so it's bigger than it was before. And then I've combined that by influencing robots, right? Maybe I am programming some software, or maybe I'm using AI in a smart way. And I'm also influencing some people, right? Maybe I have paid them, or maybe I have influenced them through my social dynamics. And by having all of these together, I now actually have enough production capacity to turn that desired pattern into an actual outcome. So this is sort of the essence of value creation. Anything we want to do in this world, anything we want to make, anything we want to influence, it all boils down to this. How much production capacity do we have, and how can we increase that production capacity? But of course, there are also some nuances to value production. This is sort of the basics, but we are always working in relationship to other people. So over here, we have what I call project humanity. And this circle is basically every single thing that we as human beings are doing worldwide, whether it's pushing back the Sahara, making a new smartphone, building a bridge. Everything that we are doing as humans is encapsulated in this circle. Now, when we start out, when we're young, when we're in the beginning of our career, we have a very small zone of influence. And what this means is that there's only a small part of reality that we can influence. But as we just looked, we can expand our production capacity. We can expand our influence. And there's a few different ways how this works. Whenever there's a thick circle, that is us. Whenever there's a dotted line, that is other people. Okay. The way that we increase our personal zone of influence is what we looked at in the past slide, right? It's by growing our leverage and competence. So we can make our own personal circle bigger by increasing our skills or by getting more capital, human capital, financial capital, influencing robots. And the first thing that we have are problems and situations that are permissionless and skill locked. What this means is no one needs to give me permission to work on this thing because it's not overlapping with any of the other circles. So the only reason this thing over here is not being done right now is because nobody knows how to do it. It's a skill locked thing. Like if you would have the knowledge and the skills to do it, be my guest, be everyone's guest. These are actually a lot of the hard problems in this world, right? We can think about them. We can think about teleportation. We can think about a malaria vaccine. Nobody's actively stopping you. We just simply do not have the skills to unlock it. So that will be option number one, things that are permissionless and skill locked. Now, sometimes, actually, my zone of influence conflicts with someone else's zone of influence. And then this part over here is actually a part that is either permission or resource locked. So one of us has to give the other person the permission to take that part and make it their zone of influence. And very often that will cost us resources. We'll have to pay them in some way, maybe in kind, maybe in money. So this part of Project Humanity is locked behind permission. There's two outcomes that can sort of stem from that. The first one is what we call zero-sum competition. And basically what happens here is that one person gains the conflicting area and the other person leaves it. So basically we're saying there's only a limited area and my win is your loss, right? My gain is your loss. That is what we call a zero-sum competition. The alternative that we have is what we call positive-sum collaboration. So if we have this overlapping area, we can also say, actually, we are going to collaborate and we're going to say 1 + 1 = 3. So we're making the pie bigger for both of us. Generally speaking, I would recommend going for positive-sum collaboration. We are living in an age of technological advancement that is unprecedented, right? We're growing in wealth, in technological capabilities at a rate that has never been seen before. This whole project, humanity, is growing like insane. Bickering over the overlap and sort of trying to take something at the cost of someone else usually isn't worth it. Usually speaking, it's better to just collaborate, make the pie bigger for everyone, and everyone gets to benefit, right? So as a rule of thumb, I would say try going for positive-sum collaboration when possible. Sometimes zero-sum is the only option if it's really like either you get the job or I get the job. It's perfectly fine to be selfish and go for that shot, but try to be wary of industries, of places, of situations where this sort of zero-sum competition is the norm, because it's usually not a very nice environment to be in. And I also think with the advancements that we're making nowadays, it's also not necessary. This one we're going to cover in a little bit because we're first going to dive into Notion and actually start building the basics of the project tracker. So first thing that we're going to do, as always, is of course go into our database collection zone. And then over here, I'm going to say planning and execution databases. Going to open this, actually turn it into a page. and this is going to be the project tracker. It has the seedling, and of course it also has its own cover. Planning and execution, project tracker database. Booyah klaka booyah, as we like to say. Okay, like I said, this database is an absolute powerhouse. This is creme de la creme. It's a beautiful database, but it's also quite complex. So we're just going to ease into it, and hopefully by the end, everything will make complete sense. Okay, first thing that we're going to do, of course, is call this one the master table. And why did we not get our beautiful cover? Let's try that one again. Okay. Basically, every entry in this database is going to be a project workspace. So a lot of stuff is going to happen inside of the template, but there's also a bunch of properties that we need to create because there's also some formulas, some automations that help us track vital information about this project. So the first thing that we're going to do is, of course, give it a project name. Then the second thing we're going to add is what we call a date span, because we're not just going to give a date to our projects, but we're going to give a start date, for example, 1st of December, as well as an end date, because we plan the projects ahead, right? So we create date spans for our projects. Then we're going to add a little formula. What this formula does is it's actually going to say days past date. And basically what this one does is it's going to calculate. Actually, I need to add one property first before it works. So we're first going to add that property, which is going to be the status property. And we're going to move that one over here. And this is either going to be active, it's going to be next up, it's going to be completed, terminated, or mini project. Next up projects are going to be projects that we have scheduled for the future, but that have not yet begun. So they will be next up. Active projects are going to be any projects that we're currently working on. Completed projects are going to be projects we completed, whereas terminated projects will be projects that we did not complete, but that we did stop. So we started them at some point, but we didn't see them all the way through. And then later on, these mini projects will make sense, but for now, you don't have to pay attention to that one. Okay, going to go back in here. And actually, I'm going to make status defined now. So we just add status over here. Boom. Okay. What this formula does is basically it looks at the date span that we set for a project, and it calculates if we are already past the end date in this span. So for now, it's January 31, so it's going to tell us we're still on schedule. But were we to say, still working on a project that I already started on the 1st of October with an end date of 1st of December, and we're going to put it on active, it's going to tell us we're already 23 days past our originally planned date. So this is just an easy reminder to show us, hey, actually, this project is already overdue. Not the end of the world, right? Once again, we're not perfect, but it is a good reminder to maybe either reschedule the project, revisit some of the reflection questions, or maybe terminate it because we're no longer working on it. That can also be a valid answer. Okay, gonna give this one a little emoji, this one over here. Okay, so we have the status, we just brought that in there. Okay, now we are going to bring something new into our system. This might be a little bit complex, but I hope I can explain it in a way that it makes sense. During our presentation, we have been looking at all these ways how the elements are related to each other. What this means is that the databases of these different elements are actually communicating with each other. And the way we do that is by creating what is called a relational database. Let me show you how this works. I'm just going to bring this down for a little bit. I'm actually going to turn these into inline databases. Okay, so we have two separate databases here, right? We have our action tracker and we have our project tracker. At this moment in time, these two databases don't know that the other database exists. They are living in complete isolation. But what we can actually do is we can say, I want to make a relationship. So over here, I can see make a relationship, and I actually want to relate the project tracker to the action tracker. And over here, I'm going to click two-way relationship, which means that they will show up on both databases. So when I'm going to click this, add relation, and then boom. Over here, you see action tracker. And over here, you also see project tracker. These two databases are now linked. And what we can do now is we can link different entries from these databases to each other. So let's say, for example, just grab this one forward a little bit. I'll give this one a project name. Build the Notion of Life website, right? This is going to be a project. Now, this project will have action items that are sort of living under it. So what I can do now is over here, I can create an action item, which is going to be create lo-fi wireframes. Lo-fi wireframes for website, create house style or branding, and maybe by the domain name. What I can do now is over here, inside of this column, I can actually click and I can choose to link this action item to the Notion of Life website project. And when I click it, just like that, you can see that it also pops up in this project tracker. So over here, I can now see this project is related to this action. I can do the same for this one. And now you can see both these actions are related to this particular project. I can also add them from the project tracker side. So I could also go in here and simply add them over here. And just like that, now you can see the Notion of Life website project is related to these three actions. And that is how relational databases work. We can link one entry from one database to entries in another database. This is a principle that we use a lot in this system. We're going to link all these databases together, and that is, once again, what we do database first design. That is where the system really becomes powerful and scalable. For now, I hope this makes sense, and let's continue with this project tracker. So I'm going to turn this one back into a page, and I'm also going to turn this one into a page. Remove all this white space. Okay. So now we have made a relationship to the action tracker. The next property that we want to add is a number property, which is called expected input. This is going to be the amount of time that we are expecting to put into a project. And this is going to be expressed in hours. Okay, then over here, we're going to add a few more formulas, but we're not going to do that right now because we will first need to make the template before those things make sense. So in the meantime, we will just put a date property, which is going to be the review date. And we're going to add another formula, which we're calling to review. I'm going to grab that one from here. And once again, if you want to use all of these formulas, you can get them by dropping your email in the link down below. I'll send you a doc with all of the assets and resources that you need based on this masterclass. And at the end of the masterclass, we're also going to explore formulas further. But basically what we've done here is that every project has a review date, because during our weekly review, we review all of our projects. So we can set the date for when we want to next review it. Let's say, for example, December 31. And the moment it goes past the date that it is today, this one will give us a little signal and say, hey, it is time to review this particular project. So this is what we're going to use during our weekly review. I'm going to just get this layout, wrap all the columns, and then the last formula that we're adding for now is what we call next up. I'm going to give that an arrow to the right. And this one is basically calculating based from the beginning date of the date span how much time we still have left before this project starts. So let's say I'm planning a project ahead, putting this one for February 21, 2025. It's going to tell me starts in 38 days. We're going to use this later to have a clear overview both in our planning zone but also during our monthly review. So that's another little formula for over there. Okay, these are the properties. Now, the real magic of the project tracker happens in the project tracker template. So let's go and create that one right over here. I'm going to say project tracker template. I'm going to add the seedling, of course. And going to say planning and execution covers project tracker cover. Open that one up right here. Okay. We're gonna clean out this we're gonna clean up this layout in a little bit, but let's first build the actual template. So I'm gonna set this one to full width. The first thing that we want to do is create a project workspace. I'm just gonna open up some text here. I'm going to say project workspace. I'm gonna make that one green. And then inside this workspace, there's a few elements we want to have. The first one is that we want to have all of the related actions. So these are all the action items that are related to this particular project. The next one is that we want to have all the related habits, which is the element we're going to build after this. And then we want to have all of the related knowledge. And these things together form the production capacity that we were talking about earlier, and we'll leverage that to actually execute on our projects and actually make the change that we want to make. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a linked view of the action database. Now, we are missing a few crucial properties in the action tracker that we're going to add first. So I'm just going to take this master table for a moment. I'm going to hide the database title because the way we're going to interact with the action tracker is that basically we're going to time block all of our actions. And we'll do this during the weekly review, but basically what we'll do is we'll take our action items and we're going to time block them on the calendar. Okay, this is the perfect moment for us to explore Notion Calendar because Notion actually has a calendar app. You can download it by going to Notion Calendar. Over here, you can get the calendar app. And once you've installed it, this is pretty much what it will look like. It's a very similar calendar app to other calendars, but the cool thing about Notion Calendar is that we can actually connect our Notion databases to this particular calendar. So I'm just going to hide all of the existing ones, and I'm going to set, okay, I want to connect another Notion workspace here. So I'm going to connect a Notion workspace. It's going to prompt me to log in. And then over here, I'm going to choose the master class that we've been working on. And I'm going to say, okay, allow access. And I'm going to open this in Notion Calendar. And it says Notion Workspace has been connected. And now over here, you can see we've connected our Notion Workspace. Now I'm going to go down. I'll just toggle these because we don't need to see those right now. I'm just going to toggle down over here. And inside the calendar, I will need to add inside here. Just so that we can open it, we have to add a calendar view. We'll just call this the calendar. Boom. And I think that now if we would go back into Notion Calendar, add Notion database, action tracker, boom. Okay, what we've done now is we have connected our action tracker to our Notion calendar. And already here you can see it. All of the action items that we have in this action tracker can show up right over here. And we can actually drag these action items here and make them as long as they need to be. So this is basically where we will be time blocking all of our actions. And this is also why earlier I said we're not going to use priorities, because we're going to be time blocking all of our action items. And what you will also see is that when I take one of these items and I lay it down over here, what we can see now inside of our action tracker is when we go over here, inside this action date property, the property has also changed. So this create branding for website that I just dragged in here has now also been changed here to have a starting time of 1 p.m. and an ending time of 4 p.m. Okay, so this is really nice because now we can grab our actions from Notion, plot them on our calendar, and then we get the action date right over here. But it's gonna get even cooler, right? This is gonna be a little bit more complicated, but this is creme de la creme when it comes to Notion. Basically what we wanna do is we wanna get a formula, and I want to calculate based on the action date. I want to check all the actions that are due for the upcoming week based on the time planned for them. How much workload am I scheduling for myself? So over here, I'm going to call this one weekly workload. I'm going to give this one a little clock emoji. Then I'm pasting in this formula over here. And you can already see over here, this action item is due for this week. So it falls within the next week. And it has been scheduled from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., which means 90 minutes of work. So this formula automatically calculates how much workload this task has based on how I dragged it inside the calendar. So were I to make it a little bit bigger, which one was it? Right book chapter in Create Lo-Fi Wireframes. Were I to make this one a little bit bigger, you can see that the weekly workload is automatically going to be changed. Now we're going to add a similar formula. Let's see. And this one's actually going to be called total input. I'm going to grab this one and put it over here. And I'm also going to get this formula and paste it in there. Okay, so now what this one does is actually whenever I check one of my action item, it takes this weekly workload and then it actually turns it into input in hours. So the moment I check this one, now you can see I finished this action item and it took me 5.5 hours. So like this, we've automated the process of taking our actions, we put them on our calendar, and as soon as we check them off, we automatically measure how much time we spent on that particular action item. Okay, in a little bit, I'm going to show you how this relates to the project tracker and how this becomes extremely valuable. But let's first go back into this template and make a few more tweaks, because at the moment, we're seeing all of the action items in our action tracker. And that is not actually what we want to see, because the only thing that we want to see is action items related to this specific project. Now, what we can do is we can actually set a filter. And one of the options is now this relational database that we made to the project tracker. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to filter this action database, and I only want to see action items that are related to the project tracker template. I'm going to click this, and just like that, the view is empty. Now, whenever I generate a template, this filter is automatically going to change to the new page that we created. So let me just demonstrate that real quick. We're going into project tracker. Just open this one over here, and I'm generating the template. And as you can see, already we're seeing a few action items, because this filter that we set to only show action items related to the template has now been changed to only show action items related to build the Notion of Life website. So like this, we only have to set up the database and the filters once in the template. In the future, everything's just plug and play, ready to go. Just press one button and the entire workspace is generated for us. And this is really, when I was talking about database being powerful, this is the sort of stuff I'm talking about. You're setting this up once and we're building a scalable system that works every single time and time again. Okay, we're going to go back to the template. I'm going to remove this filter just for a moment so that we have some dummy content over here. And we're actually going to style this particular page a little bit. Because really the only things we want to see is the name of the action item. We want to see the action date. And we want to see whether it's done, yes or no. Okay, this is basically all we want to see in this view. Now we're going to add some properties to the project tracker. Here's where we're going to use that time tracking that we did with the action tracker and combine it with the project tracker. And the way that we do that is we'll go up here, and I haven't showed you this before, but basically you can also add new properties in any page inside of a database. So if I would add a property here, and I'm just going to call this Galumba boom, and we would go back to the actual project tracker, you can see it's also added here. So we can also add new properties inside of the template. And I'm actually going to add them over here because it will make a bit more sense with what we're doing over here. So for now, I'm also just going to show these ones over here. And then we actually want to add a formula to our project tracker. This formula over here, which we're going to call the weekly workload. Let's see. That one is indeed not correct because I changed it over there. Boom. And it's actually going to take all of these weekly workloads and put them into this project. So the way this happens is we look for all of the actions that are related to this particular project, and it's going to add all of those to this project. Now, currently we're working in the template, so we won't see anything here. But if we were to move back to this Notion of Life website, over here we can now see that our weekly workload is at 6 hours. So it basically took these values, 3 hours each, calculated them in here, and then in here we can see our total weekly workload. I'm just going to put a little thing over there, and maybe we'll put it like 50, just give it a little bar. And just like that, we can see our weekly workload. So during our weekly review, we're going to be reviewing all these projects, and then per project, we'll schedule actions on our time block. We'll have a very clear calendar with all of our action items dragged out, and we can actually see per project how much workload we have scheduled for that project. And all of this is going to happen automatically. The only thing that we need to do, drag those action items on our calendar. That's it. And similarly, we're going to have a formula that calculates the total input. And I will just change this one to total input. And this one is basically going to track all of the input that we made based on everything that's been checked. So the moment I check this one, just watch that one go, floop. Now we put in 8.5 hours. Floop, put in 11.5 hours, right? So like this, it becomes very easy to time track. And then the last thing that we do is making a progress bar. So we add a property, add one more formula, and this is actually going to be called progress. Now, what this formula is going to do, it's going to take that expected input that we set manually, right? So for example, at the beginning of a project, I might have said, this one is going to take 100 hours. It's going to take that 100 hours, divide it by the actual time that we put in, right, based on these action items, and then it's calculate the amount of progress that we've made. I will just need to put the actual and then we're going to edit this property, put the number format to percentage. We're going to give it a bar or a ring, whichever one we prefer, and boom. Just like that, we can now automatically track our progress from any project using this flow. If you want to build this entire Notion system from scratch using this masterclass, then all power to you. If you want to spend hours setting up complex databases and filters and templates and formulas and automations and all this good stuff that we're covering in this masterclass, then all power to you. However, if you just want to get straight into it, if you want to get the fully functional template and start crafting your ideal life right now, then I can highly recommend getting the Notion of Life template. And as a little bonus, the first 50 people that sign up will also get a free 1-hour coaching session. So go in the link down below, grab that template right now, and yeah, thank you very much for your support. Okay, so for example, just completely clear slate. Over here, we can now add a new action. The moment we add it over here, it is automatically related to this project. And the reason for that is because we already have this filter here. We're saying I only want to see action items related to this project. And if you have that filter on the view, it's automatically related to this project. So it's already related. I'm just going to say scope web design, and I'm just going to give it a date, December 25th. And now if I open up my Notion calendar, up here, December 25, you see the action item. I can now drag that and I can say Thursday, I'm going to work on that for 2 hours. Boom. Put that in my calendar. If we go back over here, you can now see it has changed from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And also with that, we now have a weekly workload. Actually, it went to the top, my bad. We have a weekly workload that shows 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So by creating it different here, it changes inside this database. We now have a weekly workload, which is automatically added to this total over here, right? If I were to make this one shorter again, you can see our weekly workload shrinks. And then whenever I finish it, it is automatically added to the total input and also calculates into the progress. So very simple, like on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. You're just going to be scheduling your actions. All of the rest happens on the back end. And this is, once everything comes together, you'll see this is really, really nice to have. Okay. Now we've actually added all these properties. So now it's time to start cleaning up this part of the template. We're going to hide these ones because this is all happening in the background. We don't need to actively do that. Project tracker contains template. And we only want to see all the action items that are not yet done. So I'm going to say action items are unchecked. We're actually going to put the action date to ascending. And now here we have our actions view for inside this project tracker. Now that we've added all the properties, I think it's also the right time to start cleaning this one up. So we're going to customize this layout, move this to the panel, and we're just going to pin 3 properties. We want to see the progress. That is good to keep track. We want to see days past date, and we'll just have the complete date span of the project. I'm just going to apply this to all the pages. Actually going to remove that comment section as well. Okay. Already looks a lot cleaner. I'm going to call this related actions. And now actually what I should have done and what I'm going to do right now is create this view inside the action tracker. Because ultimately we want to have all the original views in the original database. I'm just going to call this project-related actions for now. I'm going to say properties, hide all, and I think what we did was give it the action name, give it the action date, and whether it's done yes or no. And then filter, project tracker contains, that one we're going to leave empty, floop. And now we should actually be able let me actually apply the filters as well. Checkbox is unchecked. Sort action date is ascending. Is that correct? We want to see the most. Yep, that is correct. And then we can go back into the project tracker template. Linked view of database, action tracker, project related actions, hide the title, set this one to project tracker template. And over here, we have our actions. The next thing that we're going to do is actually related knowledge, because as we just showed, over here, production capacity is a combination of action, which we just added, and knowledge. So we also want to have all of the knowledge that is related to this particular project. So what we're going to do for that is actually head over into our knowledge database, and we're going to create two different views. The first one we're going to create is all the related meeting notes. This is going to have a separate tab, and the other one is going to be all of the related learnings and creative notes. Now, before we do that, we first need to create a relationship between the project tracker and the knowledge database. And because this is so complicated, I'm just going to show you this one more time. Over here, I'm just going to grab this one over here, and I'm going to turn this into inline. And then we're also going to turn this one into inline. And now, just like we connected the action tracker to the project tracker, we're also going to connect the knowledge database to the project tracker. And once again, we're going to click two-way relationship here, meaning we're going to see it on both sides. Going to add this relationship. And now over here, you'll see that the project tracker has also popped on this side, because that's because we did the two-way relationship. Were I to say edit property, make this one-way relationship, then we would only see it on this side of the database. But for now, we'll just put this on two-way relationship. I can now take this project here, build the Notion of Life website, and let's say, for example, I have a knowledge piece, which is Web Design 101, and maybe this is a video that I've been watching, right? I have that over here, Web Design 101. I can now take that knowledge piece and actually relate it to that project. So I can either over here relate it to the project, or inside of the project, I can connect this knowledge piece over there. And just like that, you can see that they're connected. So once again, we've now created a relationship between two different databases that before didn't know that the other one existed. Okay, you can go back into your page form, and so can you. I'll drag this one right over there. We'll open up this knowledge database, and now we've created that relationship. Cool. We needed to do that because we are going to create a new empty view, and we're going to call this a list view. And then over here, I'm going to set a filter because we only want to see the meeting notes. So this is sort of going to be the dashboard with all of the meeting notes for a specific project. So what I'm going to say is the type is meeting. Boom. And then I'm going to add another filter, which is going to say meeting notes are related to the project tracker template. Now, because we're not inside the template, we cannot add that filter. So I'm just going to leave it open like this. And then we're going to add a sort, which is going to say last edited. So the most recently edited doc will automatically come to the top of the list. So this way, it's not only about when you created it, but also when you last interacted with it, it will come to the top of the list. And this one over here we're going to call meeting notes. And then the next view that we're going to make is going to be all of our knowledge. So these are going to be our personally created docs and our external learnings. I'm going to create that one. I'm going to just hide all these properties for now. And I actually want to see the content name. I want to see the amount of days I have left to work on this. I want to see the source from which it came. I want to see the current score. So how highly is this knowledge piece rated? And I want to see when they were last edited and when it was created. And this deserves some more spacing. This also deserves some more spacing. Okay. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, okay, but why are you not showing whether it is a learning or a creation? Well, there is this thing that we can do in a database which is called grouping. So we can basically take a database and group it by a specific property. Do we have a database with more information to show it? I'll just first show you how it works over here. Over here, we can say group, and I want to group this database by type. And now it's actually going to look at these content items. And over here, you can see this one has the type of learning. So it's going to be displayed under this tag of learning. But were I to change this from learning into creation, boom, it's actually going to show up right over here. And this group we can just hide. And over here we can actually say, don't have to hide empty groups because I just want you to hide the groups that I manually hid. So even if it's not in there, it will still show us the option. Now, once again here is because we have made a grouping, when we drag one item into the other column, it will automatically get this property. So we don't have to go all the way in here and open this all the way up and change it over here. No, we can simply drag this one, boom, and it automatically changes, right? This is why we hide a lot of the properties, because many things we don't actually have to change manually. They're already changed by the way that we interact with this system. So just like that, we now have all of our learnings and all of our creations. And of course, we are also going to add some filters here because I want to say that the type is not meeting, because I don't want to show meeting notes in this particular view. And then we're also going to say, once again, project tracker contains the template. We'll add some sorts. The first one is that I want to have the days left. Actually, that's not a sort. That's a filter. Ha! That was not the agreement, my friend. Yes, better. Days left descending and last edited descending. Okay. Boom. We have our meeting notes and our knowledge pieces for inside our project tracker. I'm actually going to add a little seedling to signal this is part of the project tracker. We're going to go back into our template. And now, of course, things are starting to come together. I hope things start making a little bit of sense now, because over here we're going to add this empty view from the knowledge database. I'm going to grab the meeting notes. That's going to be one. And from the knowledge database, I'm also going to grab the knowledge. I'm actually going to properly set the filter over here by saying project tracker contains project tracker template. And actually the only thing I'm not sure if I checked over here is if we're actually displaying all the right properties. So actually we also want to show that particular date over here. I'm going to remove this seedling because for here it's no longer necessary. Hide database title. Project tracker contains project tracker template. Edit. Remove the seedling. Boom. We now have a project workspace which contains all of the actions related to this project and all of the knowledge related to this project. This is everything that we need for our production capacity. So let's look practically at how this works. Well, let's go into the project tracker, build the Notion of Life website. I'm just going to delete this old template. Boom. Right now you can see it's related to building the Notion of Life website. So any action item, build the website landing page, can simply be added here. We can assign it an action date. Inside of our calendar, we can then scope these things. And then over here, we can create a new meeting note. And actually, the one thing I forgot to do is that for this particular view, only for this view, I want the default to be meeting note template. So whenever we have a meeting, simply open this one up. Meeting about web design agency. We can open that one up. Boom. We can have a little agenda in here with all of the points that we want to discuss, the key takeaways, and then we can also automatically add all these key takeaways to the action inbox over here. Now, a nice little thing that we can do now, we didn't do this before because it was a little bit too complex, is actually also relate the action tracker to the knowledge database. So I'm actually going to go in here. I'm going to say relation to the knowledge database. I'm going to add that relationship. And then inside of the meeting note template, I'm actually going to create a filter. And I'm going to say I only want to show action items related to, you might have guessed it by now, the meeting note template. So the moment that I generate this template, when I add an action item now, it will automatically be linked to the meeting in which this action item was made. So I can go back here. Let me just delete this one for a moment. Meeting with web agency. Open that bad boy up. Send over bill to the agency. Invoice, rather, to the agency. I can just drag that into my action inbox, and it has automatically been linked to this meeting. So very easy. We can keep a clear overview. This was linked to this meeting. Perfect. And additionally, if you want, you can also already show the project tracker here and just link it straight away, or you can do that when we empty our inboxes. So just like that, beautiful functioning meeting notes inside of our project workspace. Similar for any knowledge that is created, any learning, any creation, only shows the things related to this project. So this was a big lesson, but this is a principle that we're using in many different parts of this system. This way of sort of connecting these databases and then creating a filter in such a way that we only see related database entries in relationship to that particular template that we're working with. Okay, now that we've created this, we can actually head back into our daily review. Because if you remember, during our daily review, we are emptying our inboxes. And currently, we have a filter that says project is empty. But that is not actually the project. No, because what we want is going to delete this property. And we're actually going to add the actual project tracker. And now I'm going to say project tracker is empty. And over here, I'm going to do the same thing. Project tracker is empty. So now what happens is when we do our daily review, I have this action item that just came in from the meeting notes we made, right? Sent over the invoice to the agency. I'll actually have to show that one over here. Boom. As I'm emptying my inbox, I'm like, okay, send over invoice to the agency. Maybe that's something I want to do next week. I connect it to the right project and then it disappears from my inbox. So this is how we process all of the incoming information, whether it's an action item or a knowledge item. Over here, we can connect them to the project, boom, and our inbox is automatically emptied. And then whenever we go to this particular project, you can now see this information has been added. And similarly for the action item, this information has now been added. So this is how all of these pieces sort of move together, right? It looks a bit complicated at first, but when you get into it, you see it's actually very logical. We capture something as we're going throughout the day. At the end of the day, we take a few minutes to empty our inbox. Everything is a project workspace. Everything that we generate here is automatically related. So once you're using it, it's actually all very user-friendly. Just takes a little bit of time to understand how everything works. Okay. That being said, we are going to add one more additional step to this project workspace because, like I mentioned earlier, this goal setting can be very arbitrary, right? Over here, we might have like very long-term vision goals. Over here, we might have SMART goals. And then over here, we might have actions. But often it can be helpful to have one step in between, sort of an intermediary between actions and between full-on goals. And that is why we're going to make a project timeline. So over here, we're going inside this project tracker template. And what we want to do, actually, we're going to do this inside the action tracker. What we want to do is we want to create a timeline. So over here, I'm going to create a timeline. And this is a view inside of Notion where you can, as it suggests, create a timeline of everything that needs to happen. Now, I want to sort this timeline by action date so that it's actually chronologically ordered. And here comes the parent tag that I was talking about earlier. Earlier in the video, we created this parent tag over here. Basically, what we can do inside any given database is we can have parent and children tasks or parent and subtasks. The way we do that is by going into the settings. We can customize the action tracker, and over here we can actually enable sub items. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to turn on sub items. And what this allows me to do is basically add one item under another item. So over here I can say, okay, this is actually going to be project finances. Send the invoice to the client. Do all the taxes for the upcoming year. All right, and maybe figure out business model. These are all actions that are under this project finances sort of bucket. And what we can do inside of this timeline is actually make a larger structure for a project. So the way we're going to do that is in this timeline, I'm going to say only show me action items that have a status of parent. So I only want to see parent action items. And then actually we're going to make a very simple little template. I'm just going to add a little icon here. List. Boom. I'm actually going to call this parent template. I'm going to set the status to parent. Boom. Okay, now when I create something here, actually, I have to set this to default. Okay, set as default for this timeline view. Now, on this timeline view, I can simply add a parent action and I can drag it. So for example, for this website example, I can say, okay, build the first prototype. That's going to be the first sort of major action chunk that I got to work on. And then after that, we're going to launch website and test with users. Boom. And then actually official website launch. Gonna make this a little bit smaller. And just like this, we can sort of outline a project because usually projects have a 6 to 12 month time horizon. So within that, we might want to have like a little bit more of a substructure. So we can do that on this timeline. And then afterwards, we can go back to these actions over here. And then you can recognize the timeline once because we added this little emoji. Then under here, I'm going to add the actual things that need to happen to do this, right? So build the landing page, make things look juicy. So like that, we can sort of sub-schedule all of these action items. So once again, over here, I'm going to say seat project timeline. Show me all the action items related to the project template. We're going to adjust that one in a little moment. Now, the way that Notion makes these parent and sub items work is by creating a relation within the same database. So actually, there's new properties that have been created that we haven't seen yet, which are basically parent and sub item. So when we have a parent item, like we have over here, like launching the website, it actually shows these sub items as related pages. So what we're going to do is we're going to add one more formula, and that one's going to be called sub items. I'm going to give this one arrow down, and actually it's going to be sub item and sub item, and di is actually total input. Property token. Perfect. What this formula does, it's actually going to calculate all of the sub items under a parent item. It's first going to check, is this action item actually a parent item? If not, it's just going to be empty. If it is going to show us exactly how many sub items are under there. And the reason we have this is simply for clarity purposes inside the project tracker, which I will show you right now. So we're going to go back into our project tracker template. And now we're actually going to go into this view and get this property of sub items, because once we're going to use this over here, we have that it breaks down items in toggles, meaning that we're only going to see the parent actions, and we can simply toggle them open to see all the sub actions. So this gives us some overview clarity. Over here, I'm also going to add this project related timeline, or not. Let's try that again. Project timeline. Actually, gotta call it actions timeline. And now I'm going to say only related to this particular template. And just like that, we're going to add a little line beneath this. Okay, so let's try this out. Open this one back up again. Create a new template. Boom. Okay, these ones are not parent items yet, but over here I could be plotting the structure for this project, right? That went way too far. That went all the way to Narnia and back. Okay, let me delete that. Let's say today. Let me actually just put that like in a little bit. Boom. Create landing page. Go live with prototype. All right, this would be chunks of actions. And then over here, we can see those. We can open them up and we can add sub items. And if I would duplicate these, we can also drag other items in there like that. And then boom, boom. Just like that. We can now easily see per chunk, these have some sub items. And then we can plan them just like we did with the rest of the actions on the calendar. So we create a project. We can make an outline with these parent items using the timeline. And then for our day-to-day work, we just have regular action items. And of course, if an action item is indeed due for today, right? What was it called? Add sub items is due for today. We're going to see it in our execution zone with our daily actions. Cool. Here we're actually going to make a little change to say sub items is yes, but I want to see that as a flattened list. Yeah. So here we see now, boom, action is there, and we can actually see to which parent it belongs to. Okay. That is the workspace part of this project tracker template. Okay. So let's have a quick overview over here. We just explored relational databases, which is really a breakthrough in our Notion journey. Relational databases, really, really freaking awesome. We also looked at Notion Calendar, and we looked at this concept of time blocking, which is basically blocking things on our calendar. Now, there's a few more things to actually explore inside of the project tracker, because as I mentioned earlier on in this series, and as you can also see inside of this flowchart, reflection makes a very big part of this system, right? It's a crucial step in the circle of growth for a reason. And reflection questions are actually littered throughout many parts of the system. And we already looked at the reflection questions inside of the daily review, but we also have a set of reflection questions inside the project tracker. But instead of just writing them down as text, as we did earlier, there's actually a reflections database. More accurately, there's actually two reflection databases, one with all of the reflection questions and one with all of the reflections that we actually make. Now, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek. We're going to build this database or actually analyze it deeper in a later part of this series, or in this masterclass rather. But for now, I'm just going to show you this reflections database. So over here, I was pretty sure I hit that somewhere. Yes, I think I put them over here. Just going to grab these databases. I'm going to say reflection databases. And these are actually two separate databases. One of these has all of the reflection questions that we use all throughout this system. And then the other one contains all of the actual reflections that we make based on those questions. So as a little example, earlier we were doing our startup and shutdown questions for the daily review. If I open this one up over here, you can actually see that we have these questions inside of a database. And similarly, we have our shutdown questions inside of this database. Now, for the project tracker, we also have a whole bunch of questions. The first set of questions is related to the purpose of the project. And the most important one here is the SMART goal. Now, I prefer actually calling it a SMRT goal because SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, relevant, and time-bound. The achievable part to me, especially when setting goals, can feel a bit limiting. So instead, we just talk about a specific goal. So it needs to be very specific what we're doing. It needs to be measurable, which is where we have things like our milestones, which is why we have all the progress trackers and stuff that we just build. It needs to be time-bound, which is why we have the time span. And it needs to be relevant, which is why we relate it to our vision goals, so make it relevant for ourselves. Which is also the second question: which of our vision goals does this project actually contribute to? And then also, how does it contribute to this vision goal? That is the purpose of the project. Then the second set of questions is related to the sacrifice, because everything in life is a trade-off. I've said this before, saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else. So any project is going to have a cost attached to it. And before we start this project, we should ask ourselves the question, are we willing to pay this price? First of all, what is the cost? But then also, are we willing to pay this price? And we can dig a little deeper into that and ask ourselves, what will our day-to-day life look like when we're pursuing this project? And really try to feel that. Try to visualize for yourself, okay, what would it be like to be actually living day-to-day as I'm doing this project? So for example, I'm doing this Notion masterclass right now. Before doing this, I could really sink in and get into that state of mind. Like, what would it be like recording days on end? What would it be like creating all these presentations? Is that something I actually want to do? Because very often we are enamored, we are enchanted by these goals that we set about the possibility of success and the glory of it all. But the process is where we spend most of the time. And if we do not want the lifestyle that comes with the pursuit of this particular goal, of this particular project, we should not start it to begin with. The next one is the challenge. That means how challenging is this project? And a question we should ask ourselves there, am I on the edge of my capability? And the reason why we want to ask that is because it helps us to get into flow. There's a lot of research into the psychology of flow states. And flow states are basically states in which we are optimally functioning, where sort of everything comes together and it just starts feeling effortless. And we've all experienced this at one point or another. Maybe during a sports match, maybe when we're playing video games, maybe when we're really deep down in a creative process. Everything just sort of seems to click and come together. Now, the way we get into flow is by balancing our skill level with the challenge level. So over here you can see this is our skill level. Maybe I am already quite good at recording these videos, or maybe you're already quite good at the sport that you're doing. If you are quite good, you want to have a challenge that is equal to your amount of skill level. So over here we have the challenge level, and basically if you have a challenge that is equal to your skill, right over here, that would mean you are in flow. So the challenge is right on the edge of what you are capable of, and maybe even a tiny bit over. That is when we get into flow states, when we're just on the edge of our capabilities. Now, what happens if we have a challenge level that is very high, but we don't actually have the skill level to back it up? Let's say our skill level is over there. Then we go into the burnout quadrant of this graph. And what that means is we cannot handle the challenge that is coming at us. We're being overexerted. There's too much being asked for us. So we get anxious, we get stressed out. And if we do that for too long, we're actually going to get burned out. So burnout is actually going over what you are capable of, taking too much on in one go. But there's a similar thing, which not many people are aware of, which is called bore out. And basically what happens with a bore out is when we have a very high skill level, but the challenge is very low, because then, as you can see, we might end up over there. This could be someone who has studied liberal arts and is now working as a barista or working at the McDonald's. They have a very high skill level, but the challenge that they have is very low. And this might risk us being bored out. And sometimes we can confuse this. We're like, oh, I'm feeling so drained. I'm not getting any energy from what I'm doing. And then, burnout is really like this hype of a word in our society. So people might tell you, oh, maybe you're burned out. Maybe the opposite is true. Maybe you are bored out, right? So we want to be in balance. We want to have something that is right both on the skill and on the challenge level. And then over here, we can really get into flow. Very famous theory. I'll just link some stuff down below if you want to read more on it. That is why we ask ourselves this question over here. How challenging is this project, and am I on the edge of my capabilities, right? We want to be right at the edge of our capabilities. If not, revisit the project, revisit the goal, and ask yourself, how can I make it so that it is actually on the edge of my capabilities? Cool. The next one is the complexity. Complexity basically means how many different moving parts are there in something, right? For this project that I'm doing currently with the Notion system and this Notion masterclass, it's not that complex because I am the only person involved. I have a pretty good overview of all of the different parts that are happening. But over the past 1.5 years, I was also project lead for a conglomeration of universities and a municipality. And that environment was complex beyond belief. There were 100 people all in these different organizations, all with different rules, different regulations, and sort of managing that complexity was actually very, very difficult. So complexity is about the parts, the people, and the environment that are influencing your project. So once again, we want to ask ourselves the question, how complex is it? Will I be able to handle that complexity? And if not, what or who can I use to handle that complexity? Because if we're already starting something out where we're like, this is going to be much too complex, no bother starting it, right? Inverse here, I think, is less true. If it's not super complex, if it's still challenging enough, definitely go for it. It's not that we need complexity, but it's definitely good to hedge against complexity. Okay, and then the last one is the definition of done. formulate very clearly for yourself, when do you consider this project as done? Usually the project is done when the SMART goal has been reached. But you can also set a few conditionals, right? The SMART goal is the main goal that you're going for, but it also takes knowledge knowing when to quit. There's a very good book by Seth Godin called The Dip, which is basically exploring when do you know when to quit something. Because if you keep going at something that is actually not bringing you value or that does not have any long-term potential, you might be harming yourself, right? And we have the sunken cost fallacy where people feel like, hey, I've already been putting in a lot of this. I want to keep going because all of this stuff I already put in, I don't want that to go to waste. That is why beforehand we want to set the definition of done, because beforehand we can already know, if I hit one of these things, I will quit this project. And this could also be a negative thing, like, hey, if before March 1st I have not made 20 videos, I'm going to quit this project, right? So these are different sort of variables, different conditionals that we can use to measure whether a project is done, yes or no. The last thing that we do is we make an actual commitment to the project. So inside the project tracker, we're going to say, okay, I've written down all these questions, and I'm now going to make an actual commitment to this project. This website, or this masterclass, or this whatever it is that you're doing, I, from Palokai, am committing to doing this. That is what we do in this commitment section. Okay. There's also going to be some post-project reflections, but first let us put this into the template, because this is where the questions live. But we have a separate space in which the actual reflections live. And this is a very complex database. So I'm just going to show you a very brief overview. But basically, we have all of the different questions sort of bundled together for the views that we can use in the separate template. So over here, we have all the purpose questions for the project. We have all the sacrifice questions for the project. All the challenge questions for the project. And the reason why I already put these databases in is so that we can easily add them to the template now, because these are too long to make live here in this masterclass. That's also why these two are available for free. So once again, you can drop your email address down below. I'll send you a doc with all of the relevant information, all of the things that we're using, all of the resources in this video. And yeah, let's just add these to the project tracker. So we're going to go back into the template. And then over here, we're going to call this project reflections. Now, as I was just going through that list with you, you might be wondering, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm going to answer all these questions. That's going to take like an hour or maybe even 2 hours. And for that exact reason, inside the Notion of Life template, if you buy the Notion of Life template, then this reminder will be in the project tracker. And it says that if you are not able to invest 60 minutes to properly prepare for a project, then don't start it. Projects are very large time commitments. Saying yes to a project will routinely mean you say yes to 100, 200, maybe even 500 hours worth of work. If you cannot take an hour of time to properly think about this before starting the project, don't start it. Why would you take 200 hours for something that you can't even prepare for an hour for? So just your willingness to answer these questions is already a very good litmus test for whether you even should start this project to begin with. So that being said, let's add these questions, and we can just simply do linked view of database. Once again, this is why we do database first design. I'm going to go inside this reflections database, and I'm just going to say the purpose, the challenge. Oh, I should get it from the reflections database, of course. Okay, and just like that, we now have all of the reflection questions that we might want to ask before we start right here in a nice little view. And the reasons we put these all in a database will become clear later on. Main reason is that it's a central place to track all of these questions and make it easier to revisit them, for example, during a monthly review or during a yearly review. So it becomes easier to check in with all of the reflections. But for now, we have our project reflections. Actually, these are the preparatory questions, because then Also at the end, we have reflection questions. And these are the questions that we can ask once a project is done. So this over here is what we fill in before we even start a project. I used to have this all the way at the top. I think from a order, like chronological perspective, that still makes sense because you should fill them in first. But once you start using the template, obviously you want to have as little space between start opening a template and the actual workspace as possible. So that's why I sort of moved it down. But you could also have that before. The main thing to keep in mind is you first want to fill in these questions before actually doing anything for that project. Actually, this one, well, just start with the reflections and then actually reflection questions. Here are a few more questions that we can ask once a project is done. And later we'll look at this a little more deeply. But here we basically want to see, did this project actually get me closer to my vision goal? Did this project actually get me closer to that person that I wanted to be? Did I actually complete the objectives that I set out to get? Was there a mismanagement in time invested or energy investment? And what did I learn from this project? So these are just some things we look at after we reflect back, right? This is more of a preparation. This is more of a reflection. And hopefully that leads to new insights and ways that we can improve our future goal setting. And very important, once we've completed a project, we should celebrate, right? Life should also be fun. And it's very easy to just keep going and forget how cool things are. I think a nice example is at some point I officially launched a Notion of Life, and I just threw a product launch party. And it wasn't huge, it wasn't fancy, but it was just the people that I loved coming together, me giving a little presentation, having some food together, and just celebrating us building things. So I think that's also a very good thing to do, like celebrate the things that we do, celebrate the things that we complete. Okay. Once we've added that, I think that now we just need to add a few more things over here, namely a project scratchpad. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a new little trick, because what we want to do is we want to add 3 columns. So actually, I'm just going to say 3 columns. Boom. And I'm going to say scratch pad, milestones, and links and documents. Okay, perfect. The scratchpad over here, we can use to jot down notes related to a project. Very often when I'm doing my daily review, I will just be going through my daily scratchpad, as for example, outlined here. And maybe there's something that's interesting to a particular project. I will just Command Exit, go into that particular project, and then just drop it in the scratchpad. And over time, the scratchpad will grow bigger. And then once every month or 3, I will just go through the scratchpad, get everything that's useful, delete all the rest. So scratchpad is usually ideas that have some potential value, not very useful at the moment. So we can just sort of keep them bundled somewhere in the project. And milestones. We can set intermediary steps that we want to reach before completing this project. And then over here, we can put links and documents to anything that is not able to be embedded in Notion, but that is still relevant for this project. And just like that, we have now created a fully functional project tracker. Almost, because we're going to add the habit tracker in the next element, but it's already fully functional. We can already use this to manage our projects.